So hopefully we can get back into the school soon.
Yeah, and just so people know, I'm hitting the record button to be able to record the sessions for folks that maybe are missing one. So I just want
Awesome. You want me to go ahead and pull up my presentation,
to.
Melissa?
Yes.
Okay. There we go.
Great.
All right. So everyone, I am so excited to be back here. 3 years later, I was invited by Melissa in 2017 to come talk in front of, I think there were 250 folks or so at the fall conference. And it was only my second time ever standing in front of an audience and sharing my story of triumph over trauma. So the things that I want to talk about today are, let me click away here. First, I'm going to start with what I call the ugly facts, which is my ACEs history. The first 22 years of my life were pretty horrific. Then where I am now, 3 years later, and the positivity, faith, and hope part of my story, the impact of ACEs and the utilization of trauma-informed care in my own healing journey, as well as Hope for Healing, which is my hashtag that I use for so much of my social media posts, particularly with the podcast. My key factors involved in not just my surviving, but thriving. So now for the ugly facts. And some of you have heard this when you attended in the 2017, but I just want to briefly go through them to paint the picture of the trauma that I had experienced in my youth. When I was 4 years old, an intoxicated parent attempted to drown
I am
me.
adding Chandler Pierce.
Are you talking to me, Melissa?
Okay.
The doctor wanted to be okay for that.
And let me remind people to mute, please.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying something to me.
No. Somebody else, I think, forgot to put themselves on mute.
Didn't even
And
address it.
if everybody can mute, please,
Started all this.
so that
I just
Teri
wanna make
can
sure that-
talk freely.
Don't have an issue with him.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. So when I was 4 years old, an intoxicated parent attempted to drown me and my 1-year-old sister in a bathtub. When I was 5 years old, I was sexually molested for the first time by a 16-year-old neighbor in that house. When I was 9 years old, my mom had sent me for a can of soup to our neighbor. The mother was not home, but the 19-year-old son was, and he, quote unquote, made me earn it and sexually molested me. When I was 10 years old, I was repeatedly molested by my choir director after school. He had told me I had a beautiful voice and asked if I could stay after school for private lessons. During those first 10 years of my life, my dad was also physically abusive. However, a positive note in this is that he did go to counseling and sat me on his lap when I was 10 and said, Teri, as you know, I've been seeing a counselor, and I know now that I was taking my anger and frustration with your mother's addiction out on you girls, and I never should have hit you, and I will never hit you again. And he didn't. Also, during that 10-year-old period, I had stopped bathing and stopped cleaning myself. And so I now know that was a defense mechanism to keep predators away from me, because I had been molested on multiple occasions by multiple predators. And I was assigned a school counselor, a nun, who was psychologically abusive to me. She would take me into her office and tell me that I was ugly and stinky and that no one liked me. And so that fifth grade was a rough year for me. When I was 14, I was sexually accosted by a religious education director in the basement of the rectory, where I worked in the evenings for the priests, answering phones and stuffing bulletins. When I was 16, I lost my virginity to date rape. Also later that same year, this is a article from the Cincinnati Enquirer, Assaults Spark Police Review. My dad had written a letter to the mayor after the Riverfest, the WEBN fireworks in downtown Cincinnati. Myself and some friends were attacked by a gang. They ended up arresting 50 gang members. And I testified throughout my junior year of high school at many of those trials. We convicted 49 out of 50. And one of the police involved in that investigation asked my parents if he could take me to dinner to celebrate those convictions. And my parents, obviously, he's a police officer, said yes. However, he did not take me out to dinner. He took me back to his apartment on the west side of town where he attempted to rape me. When I was 21, I was involved in a bank robbery. This is an actual picture of me from my testimony at the murder trial for James Mills. During the first robbery, a gun was held to my head and my coworker was stabbed 3 times with a hunting knife. However, they did not capture the assailants. I moved to our main office then in St. Bernard, and 3 months later they would return. However, this time James Mills would pull the trigger and murder my coworker right here down in the corner, Marcia Berger. My sister was hiding under this desk. She was 19 years old, had just asked to go on break. And Marcia Berger, the girl who was murdered, had taken my sister's place on the teller line. I had run from the back of the bank and came face to face with a second armed assailant who pointed his Luger at me. However, the gun misfired and my life was yet again spared. One of the things we've discovered recently, because of these obvious panic attacks, agoraphobia, and anxiety that arose out of these traumatic events, was with that second robbery. I didn't know his gun was misfiring. So when he was 2 small little row houses away from me pointing it at me, I had to choose to run back towards gunfire. And so a lot of my panic was revolved around being trapped in open spaces, which is a conundrum in itself. So I felt trapped if I was out in the open. I felt as if I was going to fall off the earth. These irrational fears started to arise. And then in 2013, the shift began. I ended up going to a therapist in Milford and had this list of 5 things that I wanted to talk about. And up at the top was a toxic friendship. And then I was in the process of a divorce. So that was number 2. My relationship with a teenage son was struggling because of the divorce. Number 3. Number 4 was my relationship with my alcoholic mother, that codependency. And then down at number 5, kind of as a little PS, I guess we'll get to it if we can, was my trauma history. I thought I was quote unquote broken forever. And that, I'll mention it. I'll just bring it up just in case maybe there's something we can do about it. So a few weeks into this therapy, and this therapist, I give her huge credit. She said to me, "Teri, have you ever considered doing EMDR therapy?" I had never heard of EMDR. I didn't know what it was. And so I started to research it and reached out to Dr. Barb Hensley at Cincinnati Trauma Connection and just sent her this email and told her my story, just blah. I put it out there and said, here's what I've been through. Well, she reached back out to me and said, "I'm not taking on new clients. However, your story intrigues me. I would love to interview you." So again, driving phobias. I had to get from Eastgate in Ohio to Blue Ash and was terrified of highways and bridges. And again, those open spaces and feeling trapped. So I had to map out a route of how I was supposed to get to Blue Ash. And I remember crying on the way. And so I finally found my way to Blue Ash and went in, and she had the sweetest Labradoodle, Cody, who curled up next to me, and I loved all over this dog. And we had a little chat, Dr. Barb Hensley and I. And after it was over, she said, "I do want to take you on as a patient. You passed the interview. However, it wasn't with me. It was with Cody, the therapy dog." And so that's one of the reasons we ended up getting a Labradoodle, and Sammy and I went through therapy dog training, was because the impact that this dog had on me in the moment, her dog, and getting me through that session and always being there by my side for 4 years and 98 sessions. over those 4 years of EMDR, trying to untangle that. I like to think of it as, if any of you have seen Christmas Vacation, when Rusty, the son, comes out with this giant wad of Christmas lights. How do you start to untangle that? And that's how I felt with my trauma, was this giant wad of trauma. And so we just started to slowly untangle it through those sessions. At the time, I was also working for an agency in Cincinnati, and working in the school systems on the mental health side, and working with kiddos who were experiencing bullying in school or had some anxiety issues arising. And so I was helping these kids build their coping skills toolbox. And we were doing YouTube kids yoga, and we were doing art and drawing, and we were playing games, and just helping them come up with strategies, breathing exercises, and so forth. And it's somewhere along the way, I took a step back and said, I think I really need to start utilizing some coping strategies myself as I'm going along this healing journey. And so I started doing meditation, taking nature baths. I lived 4 minutes from Cincinnati Nature Center, working on breathing skills. And I want to talk about that in just a second, because that puts an asterisk by that one. Mindfulness is huge. I love 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness. I practice mindfulness almost daily. I'll actually say I practice it daily. Ho'oponopono Hawaiian healing, which is forgiveness exercise that I use quite often. Tapping and EFT all the time. I just started taking a Qigong, I think that's a class. My son asked what that was, and I said, just think of slow motion karate. And so it's just those slow energy moves. And we do a ton of tapping at the beginning of it, tapping all over our heads, we tap our whole bodies on those meridians. And again, just that energy work and so much more. And I'll talk about that. But going back to breathing skills for 1 second, I need to talk about that. One of the things my therapist would say to me is to breathe. And I struggled with that horribly, because my MO was dissociation. So many times when we went back into a traumatic event during EMDR, I was seeing it as if I was watching it from outside my body, watching something happen to a little girl, not seeing it from my own eyes. And so breathing brought attention to the fact that I was inside my body, and that was a terrifying place to be at the time. I didn't want to be inside my body. There were scary thoughts in there. There were scary feelings in there. Those emotions that I was not comfortable feeling were in there, and I didn't want to be a part of that. And so I had to really learn to utilize these other coping strategies, just to bring myself centered enough and more grounded enough that I could then focus. Then I could do the breathing exercises. And I would do 4 square, which is 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, and repeat that. Or I do a rolling breath. Now I utilize a lot of in for 4 or 5 seconds, and then out, double the exhale, which is a strategy I used from a few of my podcast guests, actually. I also developed a plan for my own post-traumatic care, and these 2 things were huge for me: non-judgmental observation and gentle reminders. So non-judgmental observation, 2 words that my therapist said to me so often was, just notice. Just notice, Teri. And so I would start to just notice those scary feelings or those body memories. A lot of times I felt like someone was squeezing my neck. And so I would just notice and work through them, and go in and out of those memories until they were processed. And then gentle reminders. I learned this through meditation apps that I started to use, of just gently reminding myself to come back. Just come back to the breath. Just come back to right here, right now. And those 2 things were very powerful. I had no idea what it meant to be gentle with myself. No idea. I was like gentle with myself. Well, how do I do that? Because I had always been so critical. The logical part of my brain saying, why can't you get over these panic attacks? Why? Well, now I realize the brain injuries that happen with trauma, that such as the trauma I had experienced, and the neuron pathways that were created in those ruts and the avoidance behaviors and again my dissociative responses. I compartmentalized my traumas, which was a survival technique. I've also trained with my therapy dog, Sammy. I started to do that work to become a registered therapy dog team through Pet Partners, again, to help give back to children with trauma history and ACEs. And in being with Sammy in that role also helped me continue to heal and continue to utilize that calming presence that Sammy is. I should call her up here, but she's sleeping. I'll wait till the end so you can all say hi to her. So what's happened in the last 3 years has been pretty exciting stuff. And I'm so happy to be here to talk about it. The Healing Place podcast, I will go into in just a moment. I've created a coping guide that I give to people as part of the free gifts for summits that I've been invited to. And over these past couple of months, I just continue to keep being invited to summits. I have one that I just recorded. It's coming out November 16th. So that has just been a wonderful way to continue to grow my audience, but also put my story out there and coping strategies. Therapy dog volunteer work obviously is on hold for COVID. I have a Unicorn Shadows blog. I write a monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. And I just created a resource library on my website. I reached out to all of my previous podcast guests, and the response was amazing. They were said, oh my gosh, yeah, share my book or share my courses or put, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think all of the things that they had me do, just their websites and so many of the coaching services that they offer in addition to, and that's one of the things, I know I'm talking to a lot of therapists here. My philosophy for everyone that I talk to is, if you've been through trauma, see a therapist, talk to a mental health professional, but then utilize these other coping strategies along the way, and read everything you can on brain plasticity and the body keeps the score, and do courses and do coaching and practice mindfulness. And that's what I did. So one of the things, and I'm going to try to, I'll see if I can switch over. I'm going to try this, Melissa, and see if I can do it. I have a new share. There it is. So I created, look at that. I did it. Woohoo. This little coping guide for panic attacks and anxiety. And again, this is an and to therapy. And these are things I utilized along my healing journey. When I just took a flight from Hilton Head, where I live now, back to Cincinnati to visit with my 84-year-old mother and my son and friends. And when I was coming back on the flight back, I flew without Xanax for the first time, and I challenged myself, and I did it, and the flight down was wonderful, and I was so proud of myself, and I had my healing stone in my hand, and I was using my Zen coloring book with my gel markers, and it was wonderful. But on the flight back, no issues. Weather was beautiful. We were doing great. But my daughter, who's 14, had the window seat. And she made the slightest movement to lean towards the window to take a picture. And as she did so, I mean, I'm getting kind of a little sweaty right now just thinking about it. My brain went into instant panic. It didn't even have a warning. And the racing thoughts of, oh my God, we're 37,000 feet above the earth. And I went into just that instant terror. But I knew my first reaction was, throw a Xanax in your mouth, dig in your purse, get a Xanax. It'll take 15 minutes, but you'll be okay. And then I thought, no, let's walk the talk, Teri. Let's walk the talk and do it. This is what you talk to people about. And so I really started to practice some mindfulness in that moment, that I was safe in that moment. And the first thing on here is smile. I had my earbuds in and there was a song I'm playing. I think it was an Indigo Girl song. And I just smiled at it and I focused on the words and I focused. And then I had a Nutri-Grain bar in my lap and I took a bite of my Nutri-Grain bar and I savored the flavors of the strawberry and I started touching the things around me and the softness of the seat and just really brought myself back with some mindfulness stuff. And within, I'm not kidding, a minute, I was back to centered and back. Now it took a few minutes for my body to re-regulate and my body to calm down, but I kept my breathing calm and then returned to my Zen coloring book and went back to that thing that keeps me again grounded and centered, and had a great rest of the flight and was happy to land on the ground. So those are two of the things that I talk about, are the breath and the smile. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness, for those who may not know. 5 things to look at, 4 sounds, 3 things to touch, 2 scents, 1 thing to taste. And by the time I normally would get to 4, I would be calm again. But I practice it. I practice it every day because then it becomes, you can see how it became such a habit in a panic moment that I instantly went to it. I instantly went to it because I had been practicing all the time. I noticed the ladybugs. I noticed the flowers. I noticed the sunset. I try to notice life around me all the time through my senses. These are all photos I took, by the way. I love the sea lion one. That was during the eclipse at the Cincinnati Zoo, and he was just savoring. I think of him a lot because he was just savoring being in the now in that moment. Stop and be. That is one that was scary for me, to just allow, and again, just notice what was happening. Prayer is a big part. I'm a person of faith, and so prayer is a big part of my healing journey. Positive affirmations, I find hearts everywhere, and so I created these little hearts with pictures I had taken, and I utilize these often with myself on a daily basis. Letting go of expectations, and again, saying it's okay. It's okay that I had this moment on the plane. It's okay. Something was triggered and I just allowed it, and then it dissipated. Grounding myself through connections with people. This is me holding my elderly mother's hand when she was in detox in the hospital a few years ago. And I've learned to just allow those connections to happen through people, through music, whatever it could be. Journaling, another big healing. A lot of times I would journal after I felt a panic attack or really heightened anxiety, because it would help me figure out the triggers. So I would just do that free journaling, not editing. And it really helped me figure out what was going on and what had happened. With Madison in the plane, I realized instantly it was her leaning towards that window. Reminding myself of my reality. Again, with driving, that was very helpful, of forcing myself to look around and notice the butterfly out the window, notice the colors surrounding me, the beautiful trees of fall or summer or whatever season it would be. Focusing on my scary body sensations. Again, difficult, but well worth it, because I could sense or calm myself by bringing attention to it. And it sounds so like that wouldn't work, but it did, and it does. And by focusing on my racing heart, helped it dissipate that much sooner. Again, I find hearts everywhere. I collect them. I have, oh my gosh, like just right here next to me, I have this amazing collection of hearts. I don't think I'm up on the screen right now, otherwise I'd show you. My support system, I have a huge support system in place of friends and family. And then putting my story out there into the world, through the podcast, through writing, through my blog, through the newsletter, through just connecting one-on-one with people and friends. And the hashtag Me Too, that's huge for helping people feel as if they're not alone in that journey, in that pain and the trauma, but also in the healing part of it. meditation. I try to use even just 5 minutes a day, along with my mindfulness practice. Writing letters of forgiveness was a big part of the forgiveness part of my journey. Not everyone has to forgive, but I felt it necessary in my own life to work on forgiveness for my transgressors. It doesn't mean I don't have moments when I don't um, have the anger arise again, the sadness towards their behavior. One of the things I like to talk about for forgiveness for just a second was James Mills, the one who held the gun to my head and then 3 months later murdered my coworker, Marcia Berger. At some point in my life along this healing journey, I came to realize that he and I were both born these little innocent creatures, these little babies. And somewhere along the line, he chose a life of violence and crime. And I had a fantastic interview recently and with Fritzi Horstman, who runs the Compassion Prison Project. And one of the things that she talked about is how so many of the criminals really were funneled into this path. And I'm not justifying the behavior of James Mills, but it helps me understand just a little bit better that, perhaps he didn't feel he had a choice. And then I also used to think, what did he experience? What kind of aces did he have? What was his trauma history? And so it really helped me in my forgiveness of him, and the decisions he had made that had an impact on me. I just happened to be in his path of violence. Exercise, walking 45 minutes a day with Sammy. We got caught in the rain today. She looks like a drowned rat, probably still. Biking 25 miles a week, and really focusing on my self-care. I created a safe space for myself. And so I have my actual safe space, but I also have one in my imagination that I can go to that has all things comforting for me. My oldest son, John, walked into my office back in Ohio, and I had my meditation music on and a candle burning and just all the beautiful things around me. And he had knocked on the door and came in and he said, "Mom, I feel like this room is hugging me." And so I loved that because that was the whole purpose. He said, "It's so zen, it's so peaceful in here." And that's what I created for myself. Nature, obviously. I mean, living on Hilton Head Island, holy cow. I'm surrounded by this amazing beauty and nature. And I must say, thanks God, 20 times a day, because I'll see a bald eagle flying over, or I'll just see an alligator slowly swimming through a lagoon, and I'm mesmerized and just beautiful. Joining clubs, again, that connection with others have really helped me along my healing journey. My artistic outlet, writing, and now the podcast, and then love, just love. I love life. I love nature. I love beauty. I love sunsets. I love people. I love my dog. So it's such a blessing. So let me go back to see if I stop share on that one. Oops. Let me go back to, sorry. This one. Am I back on to share screen? Can you guys see this?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on. Somewhere in Zoom. Sorry, guys.
Can you
We've
find
all been
the
there.
share screen button again?
Yeah, did I go out did I go out of
Did you stop share?
I think you
think
went
I
out of
did.
share mode.
Yeah, I
Okay,
did.
hit the share again.
There it is. I found it. All
Okay.
right. So let's go back here. All right. Thanks, guys.
You're good. You're coming in.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so now I'm going to go on to how I disarm physiological responses and redirect habitual patterns, which is a big mouthful. So my physiological responses, I talked about that flight and how I disarmed it in the exercises. So all those things I just talked about that I put in that coping guide are the things that I use. But habitual patterns, oh my Lord, so big. Brain plasticity, one of my favorite topics, and I talk about it often with my guests on the podcast. Again, I thought I was broken forever. And so realizing now that I can, what I did on that flight created some new pathways in my brain. And that's the thing I keep doing over and over, so that my response, and you can see that it's working because my response was so quick and I was able to quickly turn it around and re-regulate what was happening with me. All right. This is where I'm going to get super excited. The Healing Place podcast. Back in 2017, when I had first talked at the Tri-State Trauma Network Fall Conference, I had just started in July this fun little podcast with one of my therapy friends, she was a therapist, and we were doing just silly stuff. We were talking about angels and aliens and just being fun with this podcast. And she had to step away because she obtained a job at Children's Hospital. And so and she had a private practice as well. And so her schedule got crazy. And I thought, I really want to take this in a more serious direction. So I first started interviewing some friends. Melissa came on and talked, and just about trauma recovery, healing. I talked to some friends who were cancer survivors, someone that ran 100-mile marathon. I don't know how someone runs for 24 hours. That blew my mind, but one of those triumph things. And then it really started to take on a life of its own. And I started to reach out through ACES Connection, which is an online organization, an online community, and reach out and saying, hey, if anybody's on here, and therapists were reaching out to me, and researchers and authors. And then I was having people like Jim Sporleader, of many of you might know, who I consider the trauma-informed guru. He came on the podcast, and I love Jim, and I consider him one of my friends, and he's been very supportive of my show and the work that I do. And I think the keynote speaker you had last year, she came and joined me on the podcast as well, and Emily Reed Daniels. And so I've had just this amazing collection. Well, then all of a sudden I had agents reaching out to me. Hey, my client wants to be on the Healing Place podcast. Hey, would you like to have my client on your show? And so again, it just blossomed. And now it's been downloaded in 80 countries, just put on Amazon Music. It's on Spotify and Pandora and YouTube. I make videos as well as audio. And as you can see I just threw on my top YouTube videos, Anna Runkle, the crappy childhood fairy. I mean, she's 54,000 followers on YouTube. She's just gone viral, and she does such great work on re-regulating and talking about trauma from a survivor's viewpoint. Sarah Payton, she's brilliant mind, your resonant self. Dr. Greg Williams, Shattered by the Darkness, of his story of sexual abuse at the hands of his father. So having a male come on and talk about the male perspective of being a sexual abuse survivor. And again, just such a great collection of guests. Jenna Remersma over here on my top 10 downloads for September, she just moved into the second most viewed videos on YouTube, because she talks about internal family systems and IFS, which I didn't know anything about, and just incredibly informative. And then the way spirituality is also interwoven into a lot of our trauma history, and how folks can shift their perspectives on that impact. So then again, I've been sharing more of my story of hope on summits and online events. I recently did these shows: Healing from Grief and Loss, Overcoming PTSD, Emotional Abuse Recovery and Resilience Summit, Healing Narcissistic Trauma Conference. And then Dr. Greg Williams invited me to be on his Breaking the Silence radio show. So that was, again, really awesome to help bring awareness to my story and healing resources for people. I also created the Sammy's Bundles of Hope project. My daughter helps me with that. She's 14. And so we just collect all of these donations. People have been incredibly generous and wonderful with bubbles and Play-Doh and stress balls. And we wrote a children's book, The Doodle with the Noodle, about Sammy. And we donate a copy of that book in each of these bags. And then we drop them off at homeless shelters that house children, or if we hear of a child at a school who's maybe had a death of a parent, or and so forth, we donate these to kids with trauma history. So the impact of adverse childhood experience and the utilization of trauma-informed care in my own healing journey. There is one little story I want to share with you, and that is in regards to a trauma-informed care moment. And this really summarizes for me, I think, my dream of us becoming a trauma-informed world. And a lot of times when I'm sitting at a light, when I used to sit at a light, at a traffic light, and someone was texting and the light turns green and we want to be like, you know, move your freaking car, beep, lay on the horn. I now will take pause and say, what if they just received a text telling them their mother has COVID and is in the hospital and maybe not going to make it? What if they just worked a double shift as a nurse and they are so tired and they just shut their eyes for just a second while the light was red? What if? And so I really just I take pause and try to take a moment and look through a trauma-informed lens at everything that's happening around me. And instead of saying, God, that guy's a jerk. Okay, what's going on with him today? Or what's going on with him in his life that's maybe created him to respond in a very defensive way? So the story I wanted to tell you was I had gone I think it was right before or after 3 years ago, speaking at the fall conference for the Tri-State Trauma Network, the Hay House Writers Workshop, and had made these hotel reservations in Orlando. My sister went with me. And when I received the confirmation back, they stated, they wouldn't give me a room. And so I reached out and said, can I please have a lower level room? And they said, oh, there's no guarantee of that. When you get there, they'll assign you a room. Well, I thought, I can't be on the 14th floor of a building. I'll have a panic attack. I'll never be able to get up and down. Like, I can't do this. So I put this email together and I said, here's my trauma story. I cannot be above the 4th floor. I'm easily triggered by heights and feeling trapped in an elevator and so forth. So I just told my truth. I shared my truth with them. And the response that I received back was incredible, because the manager of that particular hotel, which was a big like Omni or Marriott, one of those, and came back and said, we went ahead and booked your room. You're on the 3rd floor. We've given you this beautiful pool view, which it was a beautiful room. They upgraded me, which I didn't ask for, but it was wonderful. And she said, thank you for sharing your story. And it was such a beautiful trauma-informed response. And so when I got there, we met. Obviously, it was before COVID, gave her a big hug. And yes, again, I love that idea of us becoming just a more trauma-informed world. Obviously, so many of you know the ACEs study and what was discovered, and just really quick: risky health behaviors, chronic health conditions, low life potential, early death. Well, when I read all of that, when I took my ACEs score, I about had a heart attack and a panic attack just from that alone, because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to die like next week. And I realized then that there was also a resilience score. And so I went to ACEs too high and took the ACEs test, or the ACEs test, but then the resilience score. And I scored high in resilience. And that was because, and to talk about resilience for just a moment, that #1caringadult, #1caringadult. And that was what saved me. People say to me all the time, oh my gosh, Teri, you're always smiling and you radiate joy. And how did you survive all of that? And I now know it's because of these caring adults who helped me build resilience in my life. And my grandma Kitty was such a calm, beautiful, gentle presence in my life. She didn't hit me. She didn't yell at me. My dad was hitting me. My mom was treating me horribly because of her addiction, and alcohol brought out the the worst in her. But my grandma was, and she was there every day after school. And so she was just a loving presence. My best friends, I spent more time at my best friend's house trying to get away from my home than I did in my own apartment. And her parents were very loving, very kind, very gentle. They called me their adopted daughter. Her mom made me a cabinet in their house filled with just little Debbie snack cakes just for me. And that was so simple, but it had such a profound impact on me as a child who was going through horrific trauma and was keeping it all a secret. No one knew what was happening with me. And no one asked, why is she not bathing? Why is she crying so much? What? It was just, chalked up to me being a weird little kid, I guess. So I score a 8 out of 10 on the ACEs assessment, and really a 10 out of 10 in the grayscale world. And by what that I mean is one of the questions asked, is a mother ever threatened with a knife or gun in any way? And mine was opposite. My mom tried to kill my dad with a butcher knife in the kitchen. We witnessed it as children. So I count that as a yes, because obviously it was traumatizing for me. And then the other question that's gray is, was a parent ever incarcerated? No, I never had a parent in prison. However, my mom was taken off in handcuffs in front of us during that particular incident and taken off to jail and spent some time away. So I still count that as a yes. It was a trauma memory as well. Faith and positivity, foundation of resiliency, bonding relationships. Those were all key factors in not just my surviving, but my thriving. So trauma to triumph, story of hope, really lies in several areas. And that is my philosophies. My 2 cents on all of this is that, yes, ACEs are preventable. However, if they do occur, having a trauma-informed care and community really provides an opportunity to respond in compassionate and supportive manners. And that's what Tri-State Trauma Network is all about. That's what so many of you are all about, is really helping us to reach these kids, reach these families, and try to build resilient skills and prevent these ACEs when and if at all possible. Obviously poverty is one of the ACE scores. And it's so hard. We can't prevent poverty in so many of these families' lives. However, we can put so many things in place that help them work through the struggles that arise. There is hope for healing in utilizing coping mechanisms, which is what I do in order to live a happy and tranquil life in the now. And so I like to think of myself as that person who really shines a light on, no matter what you've been through in your life, you can reach this beautiful place of joy and tranquility. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be moments like 36,000 feet in the air above the earth. It's going to happen, but it's okay. It's okay, because if you have those coping skills in place and you have the resources available to create those new neuron pathways in your brain and to get yourself back into that calm and joyous moment in the now, it's okay. So, all right, just a quick little sampling of my trauma warriors from the Healing Place podcast. And this is, again, just a sampling of what I have on the show, because I'm so excited about these people who come and join me and talk. And, Barbara Rubel, she's big in the suicide world, and she talks about the traumatic impact of suicide, but also post-traumatic growth and what that is. Jenna Remersma, that's been a huge popular show talking about IFS, spirituality, and the roles of protector parts. I really loved my conversation with Jenna. Mother hunger and early attachment injuries. Kelly McDaniel wrote a book, Mother Hunger. Again, great response from people on this one about what particularly daughters that grow up with poor relationships with their mothers, narcissistic mothers, and so forth. Becky Haas, oh my gosh, she's really blossomed in the world of trauma and ACEs and trauma recovery, and works a lot. She travels all over the United States and maybe even the world, talking about reducing recidivism, people returning back to prison. And then there's Jim. I love Jim down here on the bottom, of Paper Tigers, and just a great conversation. He also came back and joined me over here on the right, Pandemic Self-Care. I reached out to all of my previous podcast guests and said, hey, I want to do a Facebook Live series on pandemic self-care in the midst of this pandemic. And 36 of them came back and said, I would love to do it. So they are on the Healing Place podcast Facebook page. If you go to videos, and you can find the hashtag pandemic self-care, and Jim joined me. Again, this amazing collection of trauma warriors, as I call them, and healers and therapists and researchers and professors, and just amazing healers in the world. And finally, my contact information. So you can go to teriwellbrock.com, sign up for my monthly newsletter. I'm on LinkedIn, connect with me there. Please go to the Facebook page. I'm almost up to 4,000 followers, so I'm so excited by that on the podcast page. And then YouTube, I'm up over 400 subscribers, working towards that 1,000 magic mark where I can start doing advertising on the YouTube. So yeah, feel free to share as many of those interviews as possible if you'd like. And then on my resource library that I just added, and I have a big stack next to me of more that I have to add from my guests, but addiction, ACEs, children resources, crisis response training, depression, emotional abuse, IFS, leadership, loss, grief, and suicide, mindfulness, music, relationships, sexuality, spirituality, stress management, trauma-informed ministry, trauma recovery, and then trauma training as well. And that was trauma trainings with Echo training, and they're wonderful as well. Louise Godbold, who was one of Harvey Weinstein's victims, came on and talked on the show. And so that's the work she does. So, all right. I think that's there you go. I'm so happy to be here. I thank you for, allowing me this opportunity to share my story of hope and my own journey, particularly of all that's happened in these last 3 years. And I just feel blessed to be where I am and to be sharing it here with you today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Teri. We appreciate you sharing your story and all the things you've done to heal. So inspiring. And thank you for just adding so many resources out there for all trauma survivors, because that's amazing that, that you're pulling all that together and continuing to give that message of hope for anybody out there who's experienced anything traumatic. So I think people had a couple of comments, questions. Your book is not published yet, correct?
No. As a matter of fact, I reached out to, again, about half of my podcast guests, 70 of them, and over 40 came back. And I said, hey, I really need to finish the book. I really want to create a course. I want to do some other stuff, add some more resources, obviously, for people. And the response was incredible. And so 3 of them said, Teri, you are going to finish this book. So every Friday, I send them each a chapter because it's mostly written, but I really wanted to start interweaving the ACEs research back into those chapters. So it will be done more quickly now. I keep saying that, Melissa, I've said that for how many years now? So now it's official because they're making me, they're saying, all right, Teri, you have to get this done. So
they're holding you accountable. Well, thank you. So lots of people are saying, you're a true inspiration. Thank you for sharing. They're liking your Facebook page. Your story of hope is truly touching. You're a great role model. So I feel like
thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Question in there somewhere. Somebody asked about EFT, which the tapping and the EFT and what that is. And if you could explain a little bit more about that.
Sure, absolutely. I've had a number of guests. I'm trying to think. Allison Morris of Full Potential Parenting talked about. Oh, John D. Whitus out of New York City. She's wonderful. Does great tapping resources with children. She's written a number of books. Trying to think. I think. Oh no, I think I put it over on my shelf. I have a stack of my guests' books over here, but I don't have hers in front of me. But yeah, so EFT, emotional freedom technique. I actually came across, somebody invited me to go to a little seminar thing in Cincinnati, and I said, oh yeah, I'm always wanting to learn new things. And so I went, and it was walking through a process of talking about and tapping through I'm scared, but I still love and appreciate myself. And so there's some words that you walk through, and you go through all of these different, I look like a monkey, when you have to do under the armpits, but there's a process that I go through, and it's very calming. And I think Nick Ortner is a big name in the tapping world, but it's really rising quickly on the scene as becoming a coping strategy, again, outside of therapy, but to just bring some centering and calm and really re-regulating the body. It's an energy work thing, truly. For Qigong on Monday nights, which I've been doing, we tap all over. Like, we're tapping our face, we're tapping our heads, we're tapping down our arms and our bodies, our torso, and we touch on everything. And it's supposed to be that we're touching on these parts that are like from acupuncture, those same places, and eliciting those same results. I obviously can't talk about it on a understanding the science behind it part of it. So really look at those people, those conversations that I had on the podcast with my EFT practitioners. But it's more of a survivor, and how it's really helps me work through when I'm feeling that triggered and heightened anxiety, and bringing centering and calming to myself. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, we're just more and more beginning to understand some of the natural resources that we have within our own bodies to help heal. And so that, is more or less touching,
Yeah.
use the pun, on those points that, that we can engage the body in ways to help us heal. It's so nice to see things move in different directions beyond talk therapy over the years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Melissa, you want to share the PowerPoint process and that Terry's so graciously is going to share with us, how that works? There were some questions about, can they, find these great resources she's listed on the PowerPoint? Will they get a copy?
Yeah. I did send a link to the PowerPoint when I sent the Zoom link and materials for day 2. So you might just have to look through all those links, but I did send a copy of the PowerPoint in a handout type of form. And, if anybody has
and I'll certainly be glad if anybody wants to reach out to me. I'll send a copy as well. It's not an issue. I'm happy to share any of my resources. So absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Somebody said, Teri, I so admire your courage. Thank you for being you and for showing the world how to heal.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions for Teri before we let her? Sammy, is Sammy gonna come?
Oh yeah, let me get Sam up here.
Well.
Hold on one second. Hey Sam, come here. Hi.
Oh, look at the tail.
Come here. Come here for a second. You want a treat? I have to say the treat word.
Yeah,
Here she
that works
is.
for my dog too.
Come here for a second. Come here. Come here. Come on. You come say hi to everybody. Hello. Hi, my angel. Come up here for a second. You don't want to stand? She's hold on, maybe if I
Tilt down a little bit. There you go.
there we go.
Hi, Sammy.
Hi to everybody. She was in the middle of a nap, so
Sorry we disturbed you, but
yeah.
you're so cute. We have to see you.
She's
So sweet and gentle. Yeah.
She's a good girl.
Yeah.
Hi, baby. All right, go back to your nap. Okay.
I bet the kids just love her. Now, you probably haven't been able to go into any schools recently.
No, I reached out when we were working, volunteering at Terrace Park Elementary in Cincinnati, which is just a phenomenal school, working through their counselor's office.
Mhm.
And we would volunteer on Tuesdays and go and meet with kiddos. And really cool story, if I can, on my time,
Yeah.
share about Sam was this dog has just such a beautiful gift for knowing who needs love and who just needs that gentle presence. And I love it because she's not using words, obviously, but she creates so much calm and healing in just her presence. And so she's the perfect therapy dog in that she's so good at it. So we were at Terrace Park Elementary, and the counselor came into the room and she said, "Would you mind if I brought in a little boy that's not scheduled to be here?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, of course. Like, that's why we're here." And so they brought this little guy in who was, I think, a fourth grader. And I could tell his cheeks were just stained with tears. He was no longer crying, but he had been. And he plopped onto a beanbag, and Sammy was instantly on him, instantly just snuggled into him, and his whole demeanor started to shift just by touching on this dog and loving on this dog. And she was just rubbing her head like she was rubbing it. She couldn't get close enough to him.
Mhm.
And so he ended up staying in there. Normally the kids had about 15 minutes with Sammy, and he ended up staying with her the whole hour. And by the end, he was giggling and laughing and joyous, and just he couldn't wait to come back next week to spend time with Sammy. And after he left the room, the counselor told me his sister tried to kill herself last night by drinking bleach.
Oh.
And the parents were at the hospital with the sister and just threw him at school. And so here was this kid who was in obvious trauma mode of not knowing what was happening with his sister, not having his parents, not having any resources. And this dog came along and changed everything and just shifted everything for this kid. And he kept coming back week after week. And I just loved watching him blossom. His sister survived, thankfully. And so again, it's healing for me to
Mhm.
watch the healing happen through this dog. We had another incident where we had 70 seventh graders in a room, and she kept pulling me. And Sammy's very good about, if I tell her sit, she'll sit and she'll stay. And she kept pulling me and pulling me towards this little girl that was sitting cross-legged in the front row. And so finally I said to her, I said, "Is it okay if Sammy sits with you?" And she said, yeah, shook her head, yes. And so I walked over there. I have obviously kept Sammy on lead, and Sammy just crawled into this girl's lap, couldn't get close enough to her. And then afterwards, they told me, the teachers pulled me aside and said, "Oh my gosh, the dog is so amazing. That little girl just had 2 horrific deaths in her life this week. I think a grandmother and maybe her mother, somebody, an aunt. And Sammy just knew. Sammy
Mm.
knew this kid needed her calming presence."
Wow.
And
That's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah. What a gift Sammy has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing those
Yeah.
stories
And
as well.
in an answer to your question, yes, we've reached out to the school systems here in Beaufort County in South Carolina, and we've been
Mhm.
told, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much, but we're not allowing any outsiders into the school
Yeah.
right now." And I talked to Terrace Park, and they said the same thing. They said, "Oh, Teri, we so wish you were here, but we're not allowing any
Mhm.
outsiders into the school buildings either." So, which
Yeah.
is sad because, oh, this is the
They
time
need it
people need
now.
it.
Right. Right. They need it now more than ever. But
Exactly.
oh gosh. Well, I know you'll get back to it as soon as you can.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
All right. Thank you so
Oh my
much
gosh.
again. Very much appreciate you being here. It's so great to have you share your continued story of hope and to see how much you've done in the last 3 years. Very inspiring. Thank you so much. And I'm sure a lot of people will tune into the podcast and begin to use you as a resource as well.
Oh my gosh, I would so appreciate it. And again, I thank you so much. And yeah, I love our friendship that developed. We met at working with kiddos in a mental health agency. And yeah, I love you and I love the work you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I love you too. You're amazing. All right. Well, we will go ahead and take a break. And somebody says, give Sammy a big hug.
Okay,
From them.
will do.
We'll go ahead and take a break, you guys, and we'll be back on at 10:30 to hear from Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky. I hope you can stay with us and see some more, Teri.
All right, I will. And I'm
Okay.
going to mute myself now.
Okay, bye.